We all talk about freedom. I think for most people, that's the ultimate goal, is to be completely free so that you can live life on your terms and get out of life exactly what you want. But has anybody ever stopped to think about what freedom actually means? Let me know down in the comments below what your definition of freedom is. Is it individualized, or are there specific parameters that fit the criteria of being free? For me, freedom is very simple. It's not complicated. It just means that no one or nothing has dominion over my life. No one controls my life. No one controls or influences any significant aspect of the way I live my life. That is what freedom means to me. Which, I mean, when you boil that down, it does mean that you can come and go as you please. You can basically do whatever you want in life. But I do think that there has to be boundaries and limits on how far you can take that, because if we were all completely free to do whatever the heck we wanted and there was no consequences to anything, it would be anarchy. Because there are bad people out there that seek to do harm, and if people can get away with that kind of stuff, people are going to do it. That's human nature. But in general, I would say that freedom is just, you know, being able to live life on your terms, being able to get out of life exactly what you want. And I do think that can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different people, because for some people that might mean working a 9-to-5 your entire life and getting out the age of retirement and then being quote unquote free. Maybe you're free while you're working. You live for the weekend. You have the free time that you're not working. And maybe you love your job so much that that is also freedom. The freedom of your choice of being able to work at the job you're working at, to make money, provide for your family. All these things are perfectly fine if that's the way you want to live your life. For other people, it might mean disconnecting from all of that, removing yourself from the system and being a nomad, traveling the world, traveling, you know, wherever, doing whatever you want, basically coming and going as you please, living the gypsy life, not having anything that you're tied to, not having any responsibility. For some people, that's what freedom means. For me, I think it's kind of somewhere in between all that, because I have removed myself from the workforce, but that doesn't mean I'm not working. I didn't retire early so that I can sit on my hands and do nothing. The reason I got out is because I genuinely want to help people, and that's what I've been doing now for over a year, and it's very fulfilling to me. And that's not to say I didn't feel free in my job, because the career I was in was absolutely fantastic. I worked with amazing people. What I was doing was impactful, so it did bring me a lot of fulfillment and joy. But after so long, you know, I worked in that career almost 20 years, I did realize that it was holding me back. It was keeping me from being 100% free, because I wasn't able to go after the things that I truly wanted in life. And for me, that was a tough pill to swallow. That was one of the things that kept me up at night. I would think about it all the time, and when I get to that point about something, I tend to do something about it. So a lot of people, I think that, you know, we probably have that feeling in the back of our mind. Most of us do. Like I said, some of us, we're totally fine living the other kind of life and just, you know, doing what everybody else does. But for other people, there's always something in the back of your mind that is just kind of nagging at you, telling you there's more to life than this. You're meant for something better, and you should probably go after it. And for a lot of us, we don't take the leap and we don't go after these things, but I think we really should, because if we don't, then we're not living a fully free and fulfilling life. We are holding ourselves back, because the only limiting factor that we have, the only thing that's gonna hold us back, is ourselves. So the sooner we can realize that, the sooner we can actually break free and live that free life, to get the freedom that we all deserve, because we do deserve that. And, you know, what I really want to get to in this video is not just the fact that we should go after the things that we want in life, but also the fact that I think there are certain things that make us, or that keep us from chasing after that freedom, from getting that freedom. I think there are things that make us more controllable. And I think there are also things that lead to us giving up a lot of these freedoms that we all deserve. So the first thing, and I think this is probably going to be pretty obvious to anybody who's watched any of my other previous videos, because I talk about this a lot, but the first thing is cell phones, the internet, social media, anything with a screen, anything that can reach you no matter where you are 24/7. That is a very, very bad thing that can have dominion over your life. I'm talking about these small handheld electronic devices right here that we all have. Because the problem with this is and I don't want to dive too deep into this rabbit hole, but there's a lot of narratives that get pushed out there. A lot of narratives that try to keep us trapped. You know, whether it's trying to keep us trapped in the 9 to 5 or trying to keep us trapped so that we're pinned against each other, so that there's division, so that we don't go after the things we want. And there's a lot of narratives out there that try and strip us of our freedoms so that we stay stuck doing the things that we are programmed to do as a society. And that is basically making the people at the top richer. It's making them money. Whether it be the government, whether it be private investors that own all the companies, whether it be the corporations themselves, everything's geared towards money. It's all a money or monetary and greed-based society. That's kind of what we're left with. So all these narratives get pushed out, and they have a means now of reaching every single person on earth that has one of these. And all of us, I'm no exception. We keep our face in these things quite often. That means that these narratives that are getting pushed, that infiltrate not just like mainstream media and all that stuff, because not all of us look at that, but it infiltrates our minds, all of our minds, and we talk about it, we discuss it. Social media is a big thing because it gets pushed out to social media and people share that kind of content, whether it's for those things or against them, positive or negative content, it's still getting pushed out and it's in our face. It's on our mind pretty much all the time. So that's the big one. So I'm going to get into what we can do to get away from these things once I get through all these things that are causing this, because I think this is very important. But I also want to touch on how we can remove these aspects of our life so that we can regain our control and don't, stop allowing these things to have dominion over our lives. Stop allowing them to control certain aspects of our lives. So the second thing, and this is one that's not talked about often enough, is food, nutrition, water. All these things, there are toxic chemicals in food and water that dumb us down. They keep us from thinking properly. They keep us from forming our own conclusions about the world. They make us docile. They make us weak. Things like food dyes. That's a big one that's come out now that is now proven, and has actually been proven for a long time, to cause mood and behavioral disorders in people, specifically kids, but people in general. And I mean, a lot of these other countries like the EU and stuff like that, they banned all these products, but we allow them in our food, and they cause mood disorders. They cause behavioral disorders. So you can't help but think, are these things having a negative impact on the way we view the world and on the freedoms that we are so eager to give up? And then you have things like fluoride. And this is kind of a controversial subject, but you have studies that have come out that have shown that fluoride actually calcifies the pineal gland. The one thing that allows us to see the world for what it really is, it's destroying that. So again, all these things, you have to wonder. I mean, it's not proven, and I'm just throwing this out there as pure speculation, but you have to wonder, do these things make us more easily controllable? In my personal opinion, I think they do. And if the last 5 or so years has proved anything, it is that we are very willing to give up our freedom for certain comforts. And that's another big one that allows us to be controlled, and that allows certain people and certain things to have dominion over our life, is that we have all these comforts around us. Again, these cell phones, this is a comfort. The internet, social media, maybe a job, maybe your ability to travel, maybe all these things, all these privileges that we're granted with as a society. These are comforts. And what we found over the last half decade or so is that when we're faced with an option, either do this or lose this comfort, most of us in this country have proven that they're willing to give up their freedom so that they retain that comfort. And that's kind of a scary scenario, because when you think back about our past, like 100 years ago, 200 years ago, the things that we did not tolerate that we tolerate now, I think about a lot of the stuff that we put up with, that if it was 200 years ago, we would have been rioting in the streets with pitchforks and torches. But now, we whine about it on social media and we move on with our lives. We give up certain freedoms. Again, this is a prime example, because a lot of us give up our privacy so that we can use the applications on these things. And it sits there, it tells you in plain sight, in plain English or text or whatever, language you're reading it in, that it is taking your freedom, that it is selling your information. It's stripping you of certain rights. But we let that go and we let it slide and we're okay with it so that we can retain that comfort. Again, that's not a good scenario. That is allowing these things, no matter what it is, we're allowing them to have dominion over our life, and we're allowing them to take freedoms away from us. So how can you truly be free if you're giving up these aspects of freedom? That's a question we all have to ask ourselves. And another thing that strips us of our freedom is that when we buy into these societal norms and we go along with what everybody else is doing, and we buy into this consumerism mindset and we bury ourselves in debt, that is a very, very bad thing, because when we bury ourselves in debt, we are obligated to work until we are not in debt, until we can be financially stable enough to not work. Now, for me personally, I made sure to pay off all my debts as early as I possibly could so that I could save and one day retire early, so that when I started a family, I was going to be able to be there for my kids to enjoy their life. So I wasn't working my entire life away while my kids were growing up without me. Now, since then, because of the way society is kind of geared and set up, I've changed my mind about getting married and starting a family, but I still stayed on that path to get out of debt and retire at an early age, which I did last year at the age of 39, so that I could free myself, so that I could begin to live life on my terms and do the things in life that I had been putting off for 20 years while I was working. But for the average person, and the average American specifically, when we buy into this consumerism mindset and we focus on these materialistic things and we blow all of our money, if one of the aspects of freedom means being financially free, you are basically cutting yourself off at the knees and you're not allowing yourself to be financially free. It's going to be very, very difficult to do that if you're eyeballs deep in debt. And another major thing that can keep us from being totally free is getting in relationships with the wrong people. If you're not compatible with somebody, but you kind of brush it off and you stay with that person anyway, even though they're toxic and they don't bring any value to your life, then you're stripping yourself of your freedoms. Because a lot of times these types of people that we get into relationships with and we convince ourselves that they are good for us and that we should stay with them, and maybe we're scared to be lonely, so we're constantly surrounding ourselves with people, but they might not always be the right people. These people can sometimes have a negative influence on our lives and can control certain aspects of our lives. As a matter of fact, one of the personality traits of these people I'm talking about is a controlling personality. And something I've seen far too often in men specifically is when they get into a relationship with a woman and they allow that woman to control and dictate certain aspects of their lives. They allow them to have dominion over them. And when they do that, they stop living for themselves and they start doing what the woman wants, which makes the woman lose respect for the man, because the man is no longer being a leader. He's now being weak. And women don't see that as a very good quality, whether they know that or think about that consciously. It's going through their mind because it's kind of hardwired in there. So when you're not being a leader and you're not being a strong man and you bend to their will, they're going to leave you anyway. Or at the very least, they're going to resent you and disrespect you, which again, here comes you losing your freedoms. All of a sudden, you can't hang out with your friends anymore. You can't go out and do the things you want. Your hobbies don't align with the woman, so you have to cut those out. Maybe you're blowing all your money on the woman because you're bending to her will and buying the things that she wants. And your life is turned upside down and you're absolutely miserable. I'm saying these things not to put anybody down or to, discredit or oppose the opposite sex. I'm saying these things because I've seen this happen far too often with people in my life. But from here, what can we do about this? Because now that we know, that we are basically sacrificing our freedoms for comfort, most of us are, and that there are certain things in our lives that are allowing us to be more controlled, more easily controlled, what can we do about it? And I think the answers here are going to be very obvious to everybody. Get away from your phone as often as possible. I would not look at mainstream media or any of that kind of stuff that's pushing narratives out. I wouldn't look at that stuff to save my life. It is absolutely toxic. No matter which direction you spin it, I don't care what political party you're on, none of that stuff. Mainstream media is horrible. I would get away from that at all costs. Limit yourself on social media. Only look at things that are going to bring positivity to your life. consume content that is going to better yourself instead of looking at brain rotting content. Any of that stuff that's hyper stimuli and that is literally brain rot, it's just there to keep your attention or there to give you insane dopamine rushes. Distance yourself from that as much as possible. Make time throughout the day, and I think early in the morning is the best time to not look at your phone. So when you wake up in the morning, instead of jumping straight out of bed looking at your phone, give yourself a couple hours before you do that. That way you can focus on the world around you and you can see things for what they really are. When it comes to food and nutrition, if you can cut back on anything processed or hyper processed, anything artificial, and just focus on real, natural, whole food, that's going to set you up for success. I can tell you this from experience because there was a time in the not so distant past where I was consuming, I guess what you would call a standard American diet. It was more of a bodybuilding diet, but I was eating all the processed and hyper processed stuff occasionally as well, and my health got wrecked. It got completely destroyed. And I can tell you that when I cut all that stuff out and I healed myself and I now eat the way I eat, my life has been completely transformed. But not just my life, but my mind specifically. It is like a veil has been lifted from my eyes, and the things that I've seen I cannot unsee. I now see the world in a completely different light. It's an entirely different perspective that I couldn't even see before. And now that I've came to a lot of these realizations and I see these things, like I said, you can't unsee that. It is like viewing life through an entirely different lens. It's like living in an entirely different world. And that might sound crazy. It might, you might be thinking that there's no way food and nutrition can have that kind of an impact on you. But I can assure you that it absolutely can, because there are other people that I've helped along the way to make the same changes I've made, and it has had the same kind of profound impacts on their lives. So food, nutrition, water, filter your water if you can, or drink straight, spring water from the earth. That's the best water that you can possibly consume. But at the very minimum, avoid tap water at all costs, because it has all that bad stuff in there that is completely destroying your mind and your body. When it comes to making hard decisions and deciding what kind of freedoms you're willing to give up so that you can retain your comforts, just think about what the long-term consequences are. If we keep allowing the line to get pushed further and further back, and we never actually draw a hard line in the sand, at what point does it all stop? How much freedom are we willing to give up before we have none left? We have to think about these things. And every action that we take, every action and inaction that we take, it has consequences. So if we don't stand up, we don't draw the line somewhere, it's only a matter of time before we lose a lot of the freedoms that we've been blessed with, and we can't get those back. Or if we do get them back, it's going to be much, much harder than if we were to just stand up for these things to begin with. So think about that. How much do these comforts actually mean to you? In some cases, they might mean a lot. It could be your livelihood. In other cases, maybe it's an inconvenience. And if it's just an inconvenience, are you willing to sacrifice that so that you can retain your freedoms? These are all questions we got to ask ourselves. When it comes to relationships and being with the right people, this can be a really hard one because, in some cases, these people could mean a lot to us. And if they do, again, this is another big decision that we have to make. Is keeping that person in our lives the right move if they are toxic to your life, if they are bringing negativity to your life and are stripping you of certain aspects of freedom? Sometimes it's possible to talk to these people and work things out. Other times, you got to cut them loose. And you have to be willing to do that. It's a hard decision, but if your life is going to be much better without them in it, then chances are when you cut them out, you're going to be a better person. And that's going to be easier for you to attract the right kind of person, because you're going to have the mental capacity and the energy to do that, because sometimes these people can be very, very draining on your life. So again, just more decisions and more things we have to think about. But ultimately, what it all boils down to is just forging your own path. We all have to live a life that's true to us. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's right or wrong. A lot of the stuff that I'm saying and that I say on this channel, a lot of people probably don't agree with that. But that doesn't mean it's inherently wrong if it's a life that's true to me. And there's a lot of things that people are doing in their daily lives that I don't necessarily agree with, but they absolutely have the right and the freedom to live that lifestyle. And who am I to say otherwise? Because the freedoms that we have and the ones that we're so willing to give up, we should not take these things for granted. If there's one thing that I have above all else, it's respect for the people that have fought and died so that we can have these freedoms, so that we can sit here and have this discussion. And you might not necessarily agree with all the things that the military does, or all the decisions that the government makes, or the reasons that we fight in these wars and all these things, but at the very minimum, you should have respect for the people that have fought so that we can have these freedoms. Again, these freedoms that we are so willing to give up. These things shouldn't be taken lightly, and we shouldn't be so willing to give up our life's freedoms, all these things that have been fought for. They are sacred, and the least we can do to honor the people that have fought for them is to hold on to them. Hold on to them as tightly as we can, because if we give them up, we probably won't get them back. So hopefully this just gives you a little bit of a different perspective on freedom, so that you can think a little more deeply about what freedom actually means to you, so that the next time you're faced with one of these tough decisions and you have to choose between comfort and freedom, hopefully you can choose wisely. Be sure to share your thoughts down in the comments below. As always, I appreciate each and every one of y'all more than you can possibly know. This tribe, this community, we are now over 11,000 like-minded people strong. I can't tell you how phenomenal that is, and the amount of support that I've seen, not only for myself but for other people in the tribe. The amount of information and knowledge and wisdom that everyone's sharing with one another, and the amount of conversations and stuff going on in the comment sections is mind-blowing. It is absolutely fantastic. We're changing lives here. This is awesome. I can't thank y'all enough. Thank y'all for the support, not just for me, but for everybody. Thank y'all so much, and be sure to stay tuned, because it's only getting better and the sky's the limit.